There they are.
Dr. Banzai!
Don't you see them?
What do you mean? Who?
Evil! Pure and simple from the 8th dimension!
Un compte goutte, vite! Un compte goutte, vite, vite, vite! Un compte goutte!
Welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm James.
And I'm Matt, and on today's episode we are looking at some heroes and villains in the world of mad science as we discuss the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension from 1984 and the City of Lost Children, otherwise known as La Cité des enfants perdus. I hope I've said that correctly, from 1995, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro.
Yeah, they're quite lengthy titles. I thought you were going to have an easier time with just City of Lost Children, but you went straight in for the French pronunciation, and I admire that.
I've gone en français, and now I don't have to do it again for the rest of the episode.
Okay, it's a deal. We won't pronounce the French name for the rest of the episode.
No, you still have to. I've done mine.
Oh, okay, well, we'll see if I do that later on. So listeners, keep listening to see if I ever try and attempt that French title. Will it happen? Who knows? But today, like you said, we're looking at good and evil scientists. So the sort of heroes and villains of mad science. And we've got a very heroic scientist in this first one. He's a polymath, he does everything. And then we've got a very maniacal, evil old man scientist. Is he an old man? We'll find out as we discuss it. But we've got two contrasting visions of mad scientists.
So shall we get started with W.D. Richter's 1984 sci-fi comedy, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension, or as I'm sure we'll be calling it, Buckaroo Banzai.
Sounds good.
We have reason to believe that there are vicious red aliens walking freely among us, posing as the owners and operators of Yo-Yo-Dine propulsion system.
Electroids, Planet 10, nuclear, extortion. A girl named Jean.
Buckaroo, Black Sword Wing Commander. Excuse me, Mr. President, I have to go talk to the Hornet's Nest.
Good God.
Now, we've been skirting around Buckaroo Banzai for a little while, haven't we? Listeners have been writing in for literally years now, telling us we need to cover it. There was some possibility that it might be considered a space opera, so we sort of looked at it a little bit, but I hadn't seen it. Had you seen it at that time?
I had seen it, but I think I must have been quite drunk when I first watched it, because on this second watching, there was so much that I didn't remember. But then again, it might just be because it's such a mad, off-the-wall film that I just can't remember it.
That's quite funny, because I had to watch it twice for this recording because I watched it on a Friday night and I was drunk. And I realised the next day that I couldn't possibly come and talk about it with you because, I mean, it's hard to follow, I think, at the best of times. And
it's so bonkers. Yeah. I actually had to have a couple of drinks when I watched it again this time.
Big mistake.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on in this film. And one of the things that is so complicated is exactly what Buckaroo Banzai does, because he's not just a scientist in this, is he? He's got a plethora of different roles and things that he does in his spare time, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think given the text on screen, I think that neurosurgeon, brain surgeon is his trade. His day job, primarily a neurosurgeon. Is that fair to say? But because he does that. He trains to be a doctor and he becomes a neurosurgeon, but then he becomes dissatisfied with that because he wants so much more out of life. So he studies particle physics, researches all of these dimension hopping stuff, and then he also, just on the side, he is lead performer in a sort of jazzy rock band. What are they called?
The Hong Kong Cavaliers.
There's some interesting sort of international Asian cultural appropriation. He's the son of an American mother and a Japanese father, hence the name Buckaroo Banzai.
And he's done lots of travelling around the world, hasn't he? He studied lots of different martial arts and things like that. So he is kind of an all-round superhero scientist almost, because he's got that sort of his day job is he's a brain surgeon. His part-time hobby is being a rock star.
Yep.
He's also a physicist.
Yes.
He's creating all of this new technology and new science, and he's also a pilot. He can pretty much do it all.
He can do it all. Yeah, you say he's a superhero. Do you know what I thought he was? He is an anime main character.
Ah.
You know, he's doing so very much in his life. I have only seen the like in anime. And also just the way he's got this like he's got essentially, I mean, it's halfway between an anime cast and like HBO's Entourage, the Cavaliers, the Hong Kong Cavaliers. But a lot of this felt like watching about 40 episodes of an anime in an hour and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it almost feels like a bunch of anime episodes, doesn't it? It's like one moment it's got the alien invasion episode. The next one, it's got the big scientific experiment. Then it's got a Russian scientist out of nowhere. It's got all of these little kind of set pieces that are happening throughout the film that also make it a bit comic book-like, I feel.
Yeah. Even the text on screen explaining his origin story and how he met all his friends. You can imagine that playing out, you know, the first 10 episodes of an anime arc where he's traveling across the world to study all of these hobbies and talents and all of that, and recruiting. What's the guy called? The bleach blonde guy? Is he Perfect Tommy?
I think it's Perfect something, isn't it? It's,
you know, like
yeah.
I can see him recruiting him along the journey, and you have a recruiting episode, don't you, with Jeff Goldblum, where he shows up in his rodeo not clown, but you know, clownish rodeo outfit.
Yeah, they're all really stylized as well. So again, I can see that feeding into the sort of the kind of Japanese nature of that kind of ensemble, like you say, with the anime inspirations. That feels like something from that realm, that kind of genre. I think it's Perfect Tommy who is the guy that we see.
Perfect Tommy.
And it also, like, when you say anime as well, it made me think of Speed Racer, looking at that now, because a film like Speed Racer, which again was based on an anime, when the Wachowskis did that, it was very bright and bold and eccentric. And I think this is a film that is doing all those kind of things.
Eccentric is the word.
Every single character is stylized in such a way that they're larger than life. And that really brings it, I think it brings the whole thing to life, doesn't it? Because you've got this kind of energy running through the entire film.
Yeah, it's a total cartoon of a movie. It's weird, isn't it? Because I think it does make it a bit hard to watch. And one that I really struggled to follow because I was drunk the first time I saw it. But it's also incredibly fun to watch as well, isn't it? Possibly the reason that some of our listeners were recommending this to us is also it's the kind of film that really appeals to both of us a little bit. It's kind of like dancing right on the knife edge of brilliant and terrible, isn't it? As is often the case with films like this. If you can really get in a few great performances, you tip the scales just in favour of something brilliant. So, you know, Peter Weller, John Lithgow, Jeff Goldblum doesn't do very much, and Christopher Lloyd doesn't do very much either, but they have little flashes of brilliance in there and just keep the whole thing ticking over.
Yeah, the cast in this is great, isn't it? Like, I felt every time they had someone on screen, I was like, oh, it's that guy from that thing. I know you could say that about most films, but it felt like a very, very much a product of the era as well, because it's got basically any big 80s actor of the time that you can think of that might do this kind of off-the-wall film.
And just tonally, something that feels like it could almost only exist in the early 1980s. There's more than a whiff of cocaine in the air. Like, you know, it's extremely chaotic.
And all of that kind of feeds into this idea of mad science, doesn't it? Because the 80s, we've already looked at a few films from the 80s within this subgenre, and all of them have that 80s aesthetic, obviously, but there's also something off the wall about the sci-fi elements that are happening in the films. Like, you look at something like Weird Science, for instance, it's got those kind of like crazy things that are happening, is the brother getting turned into an alien monster and things like that. Out of the world things are happening within the film. And the mad science in this, they've got this invention which they really skirt around what it actually does. I mean, they've got a few moments where they try and do some exposition around what this overdrive, overthruster thing does. But what did you understand about that as a piece of science, a piece of technology that they made in the film?
Technology, good gosh. I mean, the easiest way to kind of wrap your head around the oscillation overthruster is that it's essentially a flux capacitor, but for dimensional travel instead of time travel, right? Nobody knows what the flux capacitor does or how it works, but it's an essential bit of gear that goes in the back of the DeLorean and allows it to travel through time.
This explanation is coming from a man who has definitely watched this film twice in preparation.
Yes.
And I appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it's basically something that can transport you into a different dimension. The 8th dimension, if you will, to quote the title.
Which, let's just quickly sidebar here, James. The film is called, to give it its full name, once again, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension. Can you describe some of the plural adventures that Buckaroo Banzai is having across the 8th dimension? How much time does he spend in the 8th dimension in this film?
Probably about a minute, not even a minute. He goes through a giant mountain.
Yes.
And then he's in the 8th dimension.
Yes.
Weird, ghoulish spectres attack him in his faster than the speed of light car. Mm-hmm. And then he goes out of there, and then he's never again in the 8th dimension.
Yeah, that is the extent of his adventures across the 8th dimension. His adventure across the 8th dimension starts on one end of a mountain and ends on the other end of the mountain. And that's it. Anyway, I needed to address that because I was expecting more 8th dimensional shenanigans.
But no, we suddenly branch out into, well, maybe more of the kind of space opera elements that our listeners were sort of suggesting when they first mentioned this film to us. So the idea of aliens attacking, but there's like an alien war happening between one side of this species and another. And we are part of the inciting incident of that because we've got a scientist who is called Dr. Lizardo, who, played by John Lithgow, who just so happens to have earlier on ended up in the 8th dimension. And when he did, he is possessed by this evil dictator alien. And because of that, the other aliens are threatening to destroy the planet so he doesn't escape his imprisonment in the 8th dimension. Am I along the right lines with this explanation, Matt? Yeah,
now again, just like picking that apart in sort of movie reference terms in a similar way. Essentially, we've got a General Zod and a whole cadre of, what are his two, Ursa and... what's the big guy called? I can't remember. But General Zod and his two colleagues from Superman trapped in the Phantom Zone. Essentially, that is John Lithgow's character. That's a fair analogy, isn't it? And they're on Earth, but they've been there for much longer and they're embedded. And there's a bit of what's the movie with Roddy Piper?
They Live.
Yeah. A bit of that in there as well.
What did you think of John Lithgow's character then? Because he is a mad scientist, literally driven mad because of his possession. But how much of that is his personality and how much of it is this alien personality? Because, I mean, most of the time we see him on screen, we don't see his original character, do we? We see this kind of...
Sure, yeah.
This alien that has possessed him.
But we don't know that, do we? So he presents as he fulfills the role of a mad scientist in the movie because we find out. I mean, it's gone halfway through the movie where we learn that he is possessed. I think. Who is he possessed by? Presumably John Warfin, isn't it? Lord John Warfin.
Lord John Warfin, no less.
We don't learn that until halfway through the film, which is fine because it allows him to be a mad scientist villain. So when we've got a mad scientist villain, we've also got a bit of a mad scientist. Like, Buckaroo is not mad. He's a pretty sane character, isn't he? He's doing mad science, but he's not one of our mad scientists. But we have these two kind of mad science characters facing off as hero and villain in the film before we learn that he's really an alien. But you can still be a mad scientist if you're an alien, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, why not?
It's a mindset.
It's definitely a mindset in this. And so we've got they're called lectroids, aren't they, these aliens? So you've got the red lectroids and the black lectroids. Is it a little bit problematic, the way that they've depicted the red and black lectroids? Or are we okay with that?
It's very hard to tell how to feel.
It's very 90s Power Rangers, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah. Sometimes when you watch a film from the early 80s, and sometimes it's like hard to put yourself in the correct mindset, back in 1984, and is this actually representation of black and Asian characters, or is this a mockery of black and Asian characters? Like, it doesn't feel that. It certainly wouldn't be progressive if you made it today, but is it progressive to make a film like this in 1984? I genuinely don't know. I wasn't alive, and it ages incredibly weirdly, and it's very camp as well, which distorts everything through the lens of time, so I don't know. It's incredibly hard to tell.
Yeah, it's a very hard one to put your finger on, isn't it? And I suppose one of the things about it is they are positioning Lord John Worfin, this red lectroid, as a tyrannical leader akin to Hitler in this.
Yeah.
So they're trying to position these red lectroids as like a far-right Nazi party of aliens, I guess.
Yeah, and not delicately either. I think John Emdal says he's basically a villain on our planet, similar to your Hitler. Like, just to sort of give you a sense of that's who this guy is. And then is it like the next scene where he's in a black trench coat screaming at his followers? So yeah, kind of hammers that point home a little indelicately. I mean, this whole film's pretty indelicate.
I mean, yeah, it just comes at you without any sort of rhyme or reason a lot of the time. At least that's what I found when I was watching it.
It definitely does. The scene where Buckaroo first gains the ability to see the lectroids, and he just bursts back into a press conference, and he's like, "Evil from hell, lectroids from the 8th dimension." And it's like, I don't think the word lectroid had been used on screen yet. And he's just like, what the hell is going on? This is so confusing. But an amazing moment, Peter Weller just pointing and screaming.
It's so good. It's so good. So mad, but yeah, it's just part of the fun of this film, just weird moments like that. But at the same time, it just goes more and more in-depth into the weirdness of things. Like, even the way they explain certain elements of the film. So they've got this whole sort of subplot that's happening about how the red lectroids came to be on Earth. And there's a whole subplot about how they came down during Orson Welles' broadcast of the War of the Worlds. And they came down in Grover's Mill, New Jersey in 1938. And the whole idea is that Orson Welles was actually broadcasting their arrival, but then he was brainwashed to think that it was just a fictional prank, as the War of the Worlds broadcast was. But yeah, having all of that stuff in there in the film is quite, it's a bold move. I quite enjoyed it, but I just wasn't expecting that kind of crazy back reference into sci-fi.
Yeah, it's just calling out its references, I think, isn't it? And name checking sci-fi for the love of sci-fi was the impression that I got.
So you can tell it's it's got all those sci-fi elements, the sci-fi tropes, but it's very much a comedy and kind of an adventure film as well. Do you think those kind of mixes of genre make it a bit confusing about how to respond when you're watching it as an audience member? Because is it being satirical? I think we're already kind of debating whether it's got any sort of message behind it in terms of its depictions. But is it kind of poking fun at like 50s B movies and that kind of thing? Or is it feels quite celebratory of that kind of stuff. But I'm not sure if having this kind of comedy and adventure stuff mixed in with the sci-fi. I mean, we've seen it done well in other films, but I think there's quite a lot going on genre-wise as much as there's everything else happening in this film.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot going on. I think if it's satirizing something, I don't really know what it would be satirizing. But it's definitely like a homage to some of those things. It's almost like 1950s sci-fi alien movies filtered through like 1980s Saturday morning cartoons is what it feels like, with a load of other stuff in the mix as well. But that's the sense I get from it. I don't think that there's enough going on for it to really be satirizing very much of anything. I think it's just having fun with the tropes and concepts of those types of sci-fi movies and the kind of cast of characters that you'd expect from that. And the cartoon stuff is just an excuse to let people like John Lithgow and Peter Weller and Christopher Lloyd do what they do best, you know, giving them license. John Lithgow more than anybody, really. He is astonishingly funny in this. I mean, what was he doing in the kind of world of comedy? Because I grew up with him in Third Rock from the Sun, but that's like 10 to 15 years after this, isn't it? That's like a mid to late 90s show. So I don't really know him as a comedy guy before Third Rock from the Sun. But he's going completely balls to the wall in this. And it's a gamble, I think, in terms of like pinning so much of your film around him as the villain. But God, it pays off so well.
Yeah, I don't know what Lithgow's kind of career was like before this. I'm not as familiar with it. I know that in the Twilight Zone movie, that had come out the year before, and he's in that version of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Okay.
So he's in that part of the film. So that's what I think about when I think about... I mean, John Lithgow's had quite a lot of sci-fi roles. I mean, when you mentioned Third Rock from the Sun, I was like, okay, so he's done that kind of stuff as well. And I think he voiced Yoda in some sort of... There was like this public radio adaptation thing.
What?
That was happening. Yeah, like I think he did like 10 episodes of some radio show. So he's very much in the role of an alien. He's a bit typecast in a lot of these things from the sounds of it.
Well, I don't know, this is almost like a precursor to Third Rock, just being completely insane in his own body in the way that Dick is sometimes in Third Rock.
But he's so good as as a mad scientist in this. But it almost feels like Buckaroo is so lauded over because he has this kind of groupie band around him.
Yeah.
So the Hong Kong Cavaliers in particular, they've all got special skill sets, and it feels a bit like an A-team almost.
Yeah, they're like G.I. Joe.
Yeah, like G.I. Joe, all of those kind of things. And you've got Buckaroo at the centre, but then you've got these really, again, eccentric characters surrounding him, all with their sort of specialities. Do you think that's kind of different for our average mad scientist? Because I think we've only seen this, the only other film I can think of that we've seen a mad scientist with a big group around him or them is Ghostbusters. Because Ghostbusters, we were looking at sort of blue collar workers, and they were all working together. They're all scientists, and it was kind of grassroots American dream kind of science where they become businessmen and run their own business from the ground up. And in this, you've got Buckaroo, and he's got a group around him, but not all of them are scientists, but I think he's made better for his friendships in that group. And maybe that's part of the reason we see him as a good scientist as well, instead of like a maniacal villain, as we've seen occasionally in the early stereotypes around mad science. It's always someone quite maniacal who is up to no good. But is it his relationships that make him more warm towards an audience?
Maybe it builds him up, doesn't it? Like if we trust Rawhide and Perfect Tommy, we trust their ability to judge character, then it lends him that kind of authority as this, incredible man capable of anything. But I think there's still more of the solitary cult of personality type of mad scientist around Buckaroo compared to, like, for example, Ghostbusters. Like, Ghostbusters feel like a unit, and they all feel like equals. And then even like when Winston comes along and joins them, he becomes an equal. He's a bit of an outsider, but I think they're all equals in the Ghostbusters team. I don't think that Perfect Tommy, Buckaroo's ordering everyone around, isn't he? And they're all kind of like in reverence of him a little bit. So it builds up that kind of ego. Buckaroo doesn't have the ego of a traditional mad scientist, but in terms of like how we perceive him, there's still that cult of personality around him that makes him so special and important as the central scientist and figure at the center of these experiments.
And I suppose that cult of personality has made its way into the mainstream as well, of him being this kind of pop star, rock star character, so that when he's performing, he's got this big audience around him who are wanting to see him. And that also translates to when he's in the operating theatre as a neurosurgeon. So you see him doing that, and that's obviously when we see Jeff Goldblum's character for the first time. But in both instances, he's being lauded over, isn't he, as this expert in the field, so much so that he does like conferences later about his big breakthroughs, which seem like the kind of conferences that you'd get from a big sort of sports personality or something like that. And that the cult of personality around these kind of characters is really interesting to look at. But then you've also got his other relationship in this, which is with the character of Penny Priddy, played by Ellen Barkin. What did you make of that? Because that was quite one of these mad moments in this film where they give an extra explanation that is probably not needed on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Because it turns out there's more to Penny Priddy than when you first meet her, right?
It's plot threads that just don't really go anywhere, but incredibly like tangled threads, like an anime, or calling it back further, like, you know, Buck Rogers style serials, you know, soap operas that have dozens of episodes that just track back and back and back, and all these callbacks and stuff. So yeah, Penny/Peggy, she's the long lost twin sister of Buckaroo's, previously unmentioned until he realizes that it's her previously unmentioned wife. She's the long lost twin sister, but they've never met. So he just sort of like picks her up in a club, and then she just hangs out with him for the rest of the movie.
But that plot point, I was sure they were going to come back to it at some point. It's called Buckaroo Banzai in the Eighth Dimension. There's going to be some sort of time travel, dimension hopping, because they've already said the big story about the Orson Welles stuff and the Lectroids arriving. So they arrived ages and ages ago back in time. So I was like, okay, maybe there's going to be something with Penny and she's going to go back. And it turns out that Penny's actually Peggy, and then she'll go back again to this point in time. I think I was giving it... I was giving it more thought than perhaps I should have done when watching this film.
So how do you reconcile that with what actually happens, which is just that she's the twin sister, but it kind of doesn't mean anything?
I mean, that's a bit creepy, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. To shack up with the twin sister of your dead wife is extremely strange behaviour from the world's greatest man.
Well, he is eccentric, to say the least. Again, it's these kind of relationships that mad scientists have, and the kind of problems they have with their significant others. But in this case, I think it's more of he picks Penny up in a club when she's really down and out. We don't exactly know why she's down and out. She's very sad about something that's happened in her life, and then almost shoots herself in the head during the performance. And then all of this other stuff spirals out off from there.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time to deal with whatever grief she is dealing with when she's first introduced. And actually, she's fine. She's like fine the next day. She takes part in their press conference and is quite enthusiastic about uncovering the mysteries of Yo-Yo-Dine.
She's just having a bad day, which instantly evaporates as soon as she gets into Buckaroo's adventures. And she really does. She's there for the entire thing from there, and kind of tagging along with the Hong Kong Cavaliers, and it all turns into this big action-packed adventure towards the end as well, where you've got the big siege happening, and there's a moment when Buckaroo's like, I need to go and get my guns. So not only is he a neurosurgeon, a rock star, a pilot, he's also an expert marksman and has loads of guns. It's just like, it's crazy. But you doing the comparison of like a Buck Rogers or even a Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
The more we talk about this, the more I can see how it could have fit into our space opera series as well. Because
I think it's the storytelling is straight out space opera, and there's a space opera playing out in the background as well, isn't there? There is like a massive alien empire at war with itself, We just don't see it, and it all takes place on Earth with Buckaroo, who feels a bit different and outside of that.
But the film ends as well with the kind of prospect of a sequel. Did you look that up immediately after watching it? Because I was like, what's happening there? He's gonna what was the sequel called? Something about
The Crime
Buckaroo.
Gang?
Yeah,
Buckaroo
the
and
Crime Gang.
Yeah. I mean, sure, I looked it up. So there was a book, wasn't there? That's what came after.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's all we got. We never got more Buckaroo, which is a real shame.
Yeah, we never got to see Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League. What do you think the World Crime League would have looked like? Just like mafia bosses?
No, much more like a rogues gallery from Marvel or DC, you know?
I'm picturing the villain from Inspector Gadget.
Right. Okay. What is the villain? What do they look like?
You never really see his face.
Oh,
he's just
nice.
he's
Okay.
just stroking the cats, a bit sort of Blofeld style. I think he's got a claw for his hand or something like that. So it's a shame we didn't get to see a sequel, but I think that's mainly because it bombed.
Yeah.
It bombed at the box office. It went from I think it cost about 17 million, but only earned about 6.3, which was a real commercial failure at the time. And I think that's probably a combination of the weirdness of it, and I think one of the quotes I found online was a lot of executives were saying nobody knew how to sell it because we can't explain what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the maddest titles of a film ever. He only goes to the eighth dimension for 30 seconds at the start of the film. You could have called it The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. You could have called it Buckaroo Banzai, but they've gone with let's make it twice as long as that and say Across the Eighth Dimension, which he doesn't do in the movie. But they stuck to their guns. Fine, respect them for it. But yeah, marketing nightmare. How do you explain that he's a neurosurgeon and a rock star and a particle physicist? How do you get that across? And that it doesn't matter that he's a neurosurgeon or a rock star, but particle physicist isn't exciting enough. Like how do you communicate that to an audience in 1984? I just don't think you can. I can see why it would bomb. And you can't just explain that, like, you can't just advertise it like, do you want to watch John Lithgow go mad for an hour and a half? Because that's like, that's the best.
I do.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best thing about the film, but from a marketing perspective, you can't really say that, sadly.
Yeah, it's true. There were a couple of other people who were potentially eyed up for the role of Buckaroo as well.
Oh, who else?
Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And Michael Keaton. I can definitely see Michael
Keaton would have been good. I think this wouldn't have been good for Hanks' career in 84.
Don't think so. Yeah, it would have been a really different kind of film. But yeah, it's so off the wall. I mean, there's so many bits in this which make like absolutely insane comedy. Were there any moments which made you laugh out loud, or was it just a lot of keeping up with what's happening in the film?
Yeah, John Lithgow. I think the first moment was when he like attached the electrode to his tongue to have a flashback. That really made me laugh out loud because I just wasn't really expecting that, and I didn't know what to expect from the film. So I had a good laugh at that, and I was pretty much laughing at everything John Lithgow was doing. He's really, really funny in the film. And as I said, the scene where Buckaroo just busts in yelling, "Evil, pure evil electrode," that really cracked me up because it was confusing and jarring. What about you? What were the funniest moments for you?
There's a bit where Big Boutte flips off Lizardo.
Oh yeah.
And I just wasn't expecting it. And apparently that was like an improvised moment from Christopher Lloyd as well.
Oh, right.
But it's sort of like you can tell he's really angry with him and he just doesn't know how to express it. So he just flips him off.
We can't
and like
act with his face either.
Yeah, it was like a really good bit of sort of physical comedy when you can't act with your face, like you say. I liked all of the... There were just so many just bizarre moments. I think I laughed a little bit too much at one of the death scenes because I was like, this is really overly dramatic.
Which one?
I think it was Rawhides,
Clancy Brown.
Yeah. I was just like, they're really hamming this up. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, they certainly were. He's good in this as well. He's a good... he's a great character actor, but in this kind of member of an entourage, tough guy in support of the hero. Like he's very good at that kind of a role.
I think the film's really good as well. Like we said, it's kind of like comic book-esque, like an anime. It's that kind of space opera sensibilities. And it adds quite a lot of imagination to the idea of mad science, because the film is mad in the fact that you are getting so much random stuff happening in it, plot point wise. But it's also got this sense of imagination that, okay, so he's a scientist, but he's also this, he's also that. He can be all of these things, and he can be exceptionally good at them. And he still is sort of the quintessential scientist you get in these mad science films. Again, another moment that I laughed was when he put on the red glasses. He was like, I'm in scientist physicist mode now, so I'm putting on the red glasses. Just like, it's so knowing in those little moments. But it does feel very celebratory as well about all of those kind of things.
Yeah, I think they love sci-fi. They're definitely they get it, and they've got a flux capacitor before the flux capacitor. Just snuck it in there. Christopher Lloyd goes from playing an alien in this to playing the Doc almost straight after in Back to the Future. What a turn of events. Yeah. Good to see him getting a bigger role in Back to the Future. He's underutilized in this, but he goes on to play, obviously, an even more important mad scientist.
Oh, 100%. Well, I think we've had enough adventures in the eighth dimension for one episode.
We've had one 30-second.
We've had one singular 5-minute adventure in the eighth dimension. But shall we move on to our next film, La Cité des enfants, perdus?
Very nice, James. Directed by
Jean-Pierre Jeunet
and Mark Garrett.
Let's talk about it.
Okay. Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Who has stolen the child's dream? The mad genius Crank in his evil scheme. To what vicious depths will he not descend? Will the tale turn to tragedy, or have a happy end?
The City of Lost Children, which we'll be calling it from now on, from 1995. This is in a very different direction to Buckaroo Banzai, but also a completely insane movie that I would also apply this doesn't feel like an anime, but it feels like 40 episodes of something, doesn't it? It's very episodic, not always totally feeling like it's connected to itself, you know? It's dream logic, isn't it? I mean, most of the film just plays out like that. And doesn't always necessarily follow any rules that you might be expecting it to. Much like Buckaroo Banzai, but in a completely different direction.
Yeah, it's very, again, it's adding on to the imagination elements of the mad science in this. And it feels like a fairy tale. You've got this mad scientist who lives on a kind of oil rig in the middle of the ocean. He's kidnapped a bunch of kids. He's experimenting on the kids to try and get their dreams. There's also all of these other ensemble characters in there. You've got the quintessential brain in the tank that talks. You've got a bunch of clones, and you've got a kind of matron woman who is directing the things that are happening in the oil rig. So it's quite a cast of characters, isn't it? Just in the oil rig itself and our sort of science setting. But then on top of that, you've got all of these other colourful characters that we see in the sort of the main town, the main city area.
Yes, it's a whole kind of dreamscape, nightmarescape. Has dystopian elements as well, doesn't it? But it doesn't have the sort of functioning, overruling government of a dystopian story in the same way that we saw when we did a series on that. But it has those elements of a kind of semi-fantasy world, a different world where everyone's oppressed and miserable, and living in this kind of bubble of existence that's very dreamlike and unpleasant and somewhat ruled out. I don't even know if is Crank ruling over the town. He has he's powerful, but he's not. I don't think he's really in charge, is he?
He has eyes everywhere, little mechanical eyes all over the place. All of his Cyclops cronies.
Oh, are they like cronies to him? I know they're working with him, but do you sort of consider them his cronies? They kidnap children on his behalf, but they're doing it for payment.
I think they're in service of him because he is providing them with the technology to make them see and to make them hear. So because of that, they're kind of, again, it's the cult of personality almost. They are drawn to him because of what they can get from him. So I would say they're kind of like the people which have an eye on the town for him.
Yes. So how does he fit into the mold of the mad scientist? He lives with as you say, a brain in a jar and a team of clones. But how does he compare to other mad scientists that we see in this series?
Well, I think the one thing about Crank is he's described early on as being, so he's super intelligent, but I think he's quite childlike as well because he's been engineered, he's been made to be this highly intelligent being, but at the cost of that, he also ages far more rapidly than normal people. And the other cost of him being so super intelligent and the way that he was made by his creator is that he can't dream either, which is something which drives him mad. He wants to know how to dream, and that becomes his sole reason for his experiments. He wants to have dreams of his own.
Yeah, who wouldn't? Even a mad scientist. But what's the kind of significance of wanting to have a dream? Is it sort of, I mean, he's a mad scientist. He's a scientist. Does he lack imagination because he can't dream? Is it sort of more metaphorical than that?
If we're going sort of down the traditional path of the kind of the scientist, I would think that imagination is a huge part of being this kind of person who's always thinking about the next step, the next experiment, the next sort of technological advancement that you can make. And if you don't have that imagination, if you don't have that creativity, then he probably can't use his brain to the fullest of its potential. So I think that's a hindrance to him, because if he's this all-powerful brain in his head and he can do all these things, but he can't fathom creativity in that way, or he just constantly gets it wrong, doesn't he? He doesn't quite understand the way things are. He's kind of lacks that emotion at the same time.
Yeah, he struggles to relate. He doesn't understand why all of the children that he kidnaps are terrified of him. And he's got some issues with feelings as well, hasn't he? Because he's sort of begging Irvin, the brain in the jar, to like explain feelings to him, and then getting mad that, not happy with the answer and stuff. So he's lacking in some pretty basic stuff, I guess, isn't he? That he just simply doesn't understand because of the nature of his creation and existence.
But all of the creations on the oil rig are flawed in some way, aren't they? You've got obviously Irvin seems like the most together person or brain in the lab, but he doesn't have a body, so he can't do what he can't just like wander around. He's constantly just at the behest of the rest of the clones, because if Crank wants him to shut up, he just puts a lens cap on his camera so he can't see. So he's kind of powerless in that way. And then the clones, they're narcoleptic, aren't they?
Yes. What do they call it? A sleeping disease or something. But yeah. Narcoleptic. And Martha, there's such a strange description of Martha, isn't it? As like a cursed by a genetic fairy. Is that it? Or all of them are cursed by a genetic fairy, perhaps. I think that's the kind of explanation given on basically what's going on with everybody, isn't it?
And Martha was made to be the creator's wife. So he just made himself a wife as well. So again, mad scientist behavior, bit
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein, that kind of thing.
Made himself a wife and children as well. I think the others are described
Yeah.
as his children. Crank and the clones exist to be his children. And Irvin as well, I think. I have to say, Irvin, I think, is my favourite depiction of a brain in a jar that we've seen so far.
That's great.
There's a whole... The whole thing is a sort of dark fantasy steampunk visual design, but along with that is the specific vat that the brain exists in. It looks like a 1930s radio, like a big old the type of radio that Abe Simpson would listen to, in a big cabinet. Like I love that, and the fact that it's on wheels as well. There's a bit of Wallace and Gromit to it as well. That's what a brain in a jar would look like in the Wallace and Gromit universe.
So you've got like a gramophone so he can hear.
I think so, something like that.
Yeah, I think all of the visuals are really good in this. It did remind me of Poor Things when I was watching it.
Yeah.
Just the colour palettes are so vivid in this. And it's almost as if everything that you see is almost part of the experiment and it's all connected in the world. Because even when you see like the sea isn't the normal colour.
Yeah.
It's green like Irvin's tank. Everything just
And
seems kind of connected.
The flea juice.
Oh, the flea juice. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, again, you've got these sort of quirky group of scientists and creations of scientists in the lab. And then in the sort of like the town, you've got a quirky ensemble of people. They're basically like part of a carnival, aren't they? So you've got the strong man, you've got the guy who runs the flea circus, you've got the conjoined twins, all of the kids just running around doing whatever they're doing. But those sort of main characters all seem to fit into the same sort of grouping.
Which is...
Well, it's part of the imagination element again, isn't it? It's that kind of... It almost makes it a bit sort of fairy tale-esque, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, European fairy tale. It has that feel to it, doesn't it? So whether it's following... So, yeah, I said it's like dream logic earlier, or maybe is it more like fairy tale logic? There's a moment where... where one is poisoned with the flea juice and is going to kill Miette, and then she cries and she sets off just a chain reaction of events with her tear that ultimately leads to like a massive boat crashing in and stopping one from being on the point of killing her. And that is more like fairy tale logic, isn't it, than dream logic, because there's too many like A to B moments to really function as dream logic. It's more like something that could only happen in a fairy tale, especially because it all happen. It's like a ridiculous series of events involving a car crash and a boat crash that all happens in a quick enough time that would interrupt Ron Perlman choking a tiny child to death, basically, which I assume wouldn't take. I don't know. I just assume he's a big guy.
I mean, also he's the strong guy as well, isn't he? He's the strong man that we see in the story. So yeah. It's going to happen quickly if he's at your neck. But that moment is quite horrific, isn't it? And I feel like it does this interesting thing of balancing the kind of the almost horror elements that are happening, because you've got this kind of, like I say, they've got these kind of carnival characters which are almost leaning into a kind of sense of horror. And then you've also got this wonder in the depiction of what's happening in the sort of sci-fi elements. Like you've got a scientist who has created life, who has done all of these things. You've got this wondrous invention, well, could be wondrous, that can like take your dreams out and put them into a tube that you can basically capture someone's dreams in there. So it's got this kind of like wondrous element, but then everything, again, it's that fairy tale element, I guess, isn't it? Because it's kind of, I think when you watch this, it's freaky and uncanny, and it's got that sort of scary element to it that makes the science darker and makes it probably more akin to our early mad science films that we looked at, when there's stuff like your Frankensteins and your Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hydes, and even the lab itself is dark and dingy. It's separated from, like, all of the labs we looked at previously were in the basement. They were like a hidden secret. they're not out on display. This lab is so far from being on display, it's out in the ocean, protected by a minefield. So they're just going one step further than they have previously.
Yeah, it's extremely removed from the rest of the world, and there's almost like a sense of the more removed your mad science lab is from civilization, the madder things get. Like Frankenstein's castle is this place of utter madness because it's up on the hill and away from civilization. And Crank, he's built a whole minefield around him and he's doing all these horrible... that allows him to do all these horrible experiments on children because there's no one watching over him. I mean, you get the impression that even if he did it in the city, I think he could get away with it because the Cyclops cult are operating pretty much out in the open and doing whatever the hell they want. And they're pretty horrible as well. And no one is really doing anything to stop them. It's up to the kids really to fight back against them. But it's that visual kind of storytelling of setting the mad science lab away from the world that allows a mad scientist to operate in secrecy and do horrible things.
And I guess that sci-fi meeting sort of fantasy element that we've been talking about comes in the actual plot of the film, where you've got one's brother being taken. So you've got a child being abducted, and that feels very much like your traditional sort of grim fairy tales, things like that, where you get the wicked witch stealing away the kids. But in this case, it's a wicked old scientist who is there to do bad things to these kids and experiment on them and take them away so they can't see their families. I think those elements are quite an interesting addition to your kind of like sci-fi story in this.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So what is the nature of the experiment that Crank is trying to do? He's stealing these dreams, and what is he inserting them literally into himself? Is that what the kind of headgear that he wears a few times in the film? Is that the purpose of it, or is it a bit more esoteric than that? And it's more catching distilling the essence of imagination into himself, or is he literally just trying to like inject a single dream into his brain?
I felt like it was a bit sort of Inception-y. Like he was inside the dream of the kids to try and experience them. Because there's that moment towards the end when Miette goes into the dream and then Crank is aware and he says something like, what are you doing in my dream? And it begins as Grub's dream, doesn't it? Because it's his dream at the start of it being Christmas time and then being surrounded by the Santas. But that feels like a dream that Crank has inserted.
Yeah, because he's trying to cultivate that dream later in the film, isn't he? He's completely lost touch, or maybe he was never in touch with any children. But he's desperately trying to like instill the idea of that dream later on. He dresses up like Santa. He has all the clones sort of dancing around and singing to them because he thinks that's going to give them a nice dream of Santa. So he does seem to be chasing that kind of one idealized happy dream. And also at the start of the film, isn't the problem that they only have nightmares, and that's why the experiment keeps going wrong, is because the kids are only having nightmares. So it's not just about getting any dream, I suppose, is it? There is a specific kind of dream that he wants, and a nightmare isn't doing the job.
But it feels like Irvin is trying to make sure that these are staying nightmares because he doesn't want Crank to get his way. So I felt like Irvin wasn't telling Crank the way to do it, because he's like an unreliable narrator throughout this, isn't he? He's always telling Crank stories and not all of them are the correct story. And he's always sort of whispering stuff into his ear to upset him or to try and manipulate what's going on. And I think he's doing this deliberately because he's the one who lets the tube with the dream that gets to the original, the creator, the mad scientist who started it all. He's the one who kind of orchestrates all of this. So it feels like he is purposefully trying to sabotage Crank's experiments throughout this and trying to make sure that the kids don't have any nice dreams.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to know exactly how the experiment should and could work, and he can very quickly... Well, I mean, when he bottles the sort of SOS dream message and sends it out to the original scientist, the real mad scientist, I'm not clear if that is a successful version of Crank's experiment or something else that's unique to Irvin's end. But he's able to do that very quickly and very efficiently. He seems to be better at what Crank is trying to do than Crank is, even though Crank is depicted as like the most... What is he like? More intelligent than any man ever, or something.
Bold statement.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm putting that on my CV.
Yeah.
But then his intelligence is different to Miette's as well, or Crumb, because she's got this kind of streetwise intelligence, which I think is in contrast to Crank's kind of misunderstanding of a lot of things. He doesn't quite get the real world. And they're also kind of, you're following both their kind of journeys as characters, aren't you? Because Crank has got this obsession about trying to find this dream, and his dream is to have a dream, whereas Miette she doesn't say it to anyone, but she kind of dreams of having a family, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And they're both kind of on these missions throughout the film to kind of make these things come to pass.
Yeah, there's a strong found family element to it, and especially because there are no real families in the film. I don't think, are there?
No, that's a really good point.
The clones, sort of the closest thing to any real relatives depicted on screen that we know of. So the found family of Juan and is it Donry, little brother, and Miette. That's the closest thing to real family that we see in the film. And that's definitely like the emotional heart of the film as well. I don't think you're supposed to feel like Crank, etc., are a real family. They certainly don't feel like one, do they?
No, they're kind of just there by circumstance. But I mean, the clones kind of have that kind of sibling rivalry, don't they, at times, when one of them's told that they're the original, and they like laugh at each other and things like that, and they seem like part of the family.
I suppose.
I think
so, yeah.
they
with each other, yeah.
And like Irvin gets called Uncle Irvin by them. So I think those.
But it's a bit twisted and horrible, isn't it? They're all in a pretty nasty situation. I mean, Irvin does not want to be there with any of them. I suppose he escapes with the clones, doesn't he? He seems to have the clones and Irvin seem to have a better relationship. It's Crank, I guess, is the rot at the centre of that family.
And what did you think of the creator as this kind of mad scientist as well? Because he reappears towards the end. You see the original that the clones are based on, and his first thing is, right, I've just got to destroy this entire place, until he realizes who he was when he gets that piece of paper with some of his scrawls of equations on, and he just suddenly has an epiphany into who he used to be. What did you make of him as a character?
I thought he was he feels just a little bit out of reach, doesn't he? Like we don't quite get to him. He's amnesiac until a minute before the end of the movie. Because I thought that he had got his memories back. I thought the dream had brought his memories back to him. But then you still get a few more moments where he doesn't seem to know what's going on or who everyone is, or it's coming back to him in kind of fits and starts. And then he just has this revelation. He obviously has a revelation and then immediately dies. So we don't actually get him. We never get him on screen. We never understand what was going on with him, why this fight broke out with Crank in the lab. So he just sort of like feels on the edges of the story, and you can't actually tell it. So I just said that Crank is like the rot at the center of that mad science family, but is he, or is the actual creator? Because what we've also got here is a bunch of creations who have turned on their creator, like Frankenstein and his creation. So what led to that? We see it all play out in a kind of dreamlike montage memory, not really understanding him as the mad scientist at the kind of top of the tree, I guess, and at the start of the story. We don't quite get that. Unless, I mean, we can take Irvin's word for it, I suppose.
I quite like that as well. The fact that you can't understand the mind of this person that has done all of these crazy things. What was the reason behind what he was doing with all these creations? Was it just to prove that he could do it? I mean, they don't really go into that, like you say, because he's only sparingly in the film at all as a character. But I think it just adds to the kind of the eeriness of what's going on, and the fairy tale element of it, because you don't need to explain everything in a fairy tale in terms of exposition and what happened to these characters. It's just like, there was once a man who did this, and this is what happened. And even the way Irvin recounts those stories, he says it like a once upon a time, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So again, it's the fantasy elements of it. All of that is feeding into it, and the music even seems dreamlike. It's Angelo Badalamenti, who we all know from doing an abundance of David Lynch soundtracks, and that kind of eerie nature to that, and the uncanny nature of the shots as well. You've got these kind of fisheye lenses that are happening, these distorted images that you see in the dream sequences. All of it's really adding to this visual language that is making you think that these events are uncanny and surreal.
Yeah. I think this definitely feels like how a mad scientist would operate inside of a fairy tale story. That was my sort of lasting impression from a mad science perspective of this film. It has that dreamlike quality, but I think fairy tale is a more appropriate sort of description of the tone. And
are mad science stories now modern day fairy tales then, if we think about it like that? So something like The Fly is almost like a Beauty and the Beast without the happy ending, and all of that kind of stuff. Do you think they've all got a root in fairy tales and those kind of historical stories that we've been told?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it has the same sort of societal function, I guess, because I mean, mad science stories are morality stories, aren't they? They're, there's always a quite straightforward, usually, moral of the story, which is check your ego, don't play God, etc. That's what we've seen. Whereas, I don't know, a lot of like traditional fairy tales almost don't have a point, do they? Like the protagonist gets by on the skin of their teeth, or doesn't, or just terrible things happen, and because a fairy like felt like screwing with you, or a witch or whatever,
or it's a don't go into the woods are bad. This is kind of that. It's don't do that experiment. Experiments are bad, but they're not. I think they're more complex in these stories because the experiments aren't necessarily bad. It's what they may lead to if they're not regulated and checked and precautions are made.
Yeah, maybe they do sort of fulfill the same sort of narrative niche in some ways as fairy tales. I think that's a nice comparison. We should keep our eyes out in future episodes for how well our mad science stories stack up as possible modern fairy tales.
Yeah, I think we should add it to our list of things to check for as we continue the series on mad science.
Oh, you're doing your wrapping up voice, James. Is that the end of is that a fairy tale ending to our episode on City of Lost Children and Buckaroo Banzai?
Yes. In the words of the French, fin.
Lovely. That's better pronunciation than Ron Perlman.
Yes, well, that's it for today's episode. As my wrapping up voice will be telling you, remember, if you want to hear more episodes of the podcast, make sure you subscribe to your podcast app of choice so you get those episodes as soon as they drop into the feed.
You can find us on social media. Search for Journey Through Sci-Fi. You can visit our website, journeythroughsci-fi.com, for more information, more episodes, more series of the show.
And if you want a free and easy way to support the podcast, why not leave us a review? A 5-star review does us wonders for our egos, for our scientific hubris, and for our charting in the algorithm of podcasts. So we'd really, really appreciate it if you could leave us a review. It's a quick and easy way for us to help new listeners find the show.
If you'd like more content from Journey Through Sci-Fi, we have a fairy tale treasure trove of it over on patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Loads of bonus episodes over there. Next time on Journey Through Sci-Fi, we will be looking at The Nutty Professor from 1996 and Flubber from 1997.
Yes, revisiting remakes of a couple of 60s classics that we looked at earlier in the series, this time with Eddie Murphy and Robin Williams.
Will they be fairy tale like? We'll have to wait and find out.
I think a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they've got
Now
a good
everything's
cast.
got a fairy tale lens. Everything we look at is going to be through that lens. All right, that's all for this time. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you soon.
Bye.